What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the CDL recap, where we talk about these past week's matches, what happened, and some of the big talking points for this weekend. If you wouldn't mind dropping a like on this video, I'm trying to hit 3 likes on this video, and also subscribe if you enjoy CDL content. 83-ish% of the people who watch my videos aren't subbed, so if you find yourself coming back to my content and watching it, and especially if you enjoy it, please consider subscribing. It's absolutely free and it helps support the channel. With all that being said, let's hop into the first thing I want to talk about. I have 3 main talking points. I want to talk about Seattle. Obviously, Seattle is not as dominant as we thought they were in the beginning of the season, especially after, you know, the kickoff in the first week or two. Seattle was looking really good, right? I believe they were 3-0 coming into this weekend, and they lost both their matches this weekend, dropping them to 3-2, and, you know, didn't get one of those top seeds like we thought they were going to going into Major 1. Obviously, they had to restart the Bocage hardpoint versus Florida in their first series, and they just kind of lost composure after that. They couldn't regain, and it was something that a lot of people have talked about as a possible problem for this team. You know, throughout this season, a lot of people were talking about this, especially in the beginning of the year, is how can this team, you know, hold their composure? What can they do when they really face some tough situations? And I think this kind of showed that it's going to be tough for a young team. You know, you have Sib and Pred, who are rookies, and you have Mac, who's in, I believe, like his 3rd season of Pro COD. So it's definitely a very young team, and obviously Accuracy has been doing this for a long time. So it's going to be tough for a team like this to hold their composure, especially, I mean, you could see in the cams, you know, Sib looked really frustrated. Pred looked really frustrated throughout this match against Florida. So it definitely sucks when you win map 1 and then you have to restart because of the whole Vivid disconnect, and then you lose in a dominant fashion, you get destroyed, and then you get 3-0'd. So obviously it's a tough situation for them, and I do feel for them, but I'm surprised they didn't just stop the match when Vivid disconnected in the first place, right? Because they were like tied when the match stopped, or when Vivid disconnected, so like they might as well have just stopped it. But that's beside the point. It's definitely one thing that we can say about this team is they have to work on holding their composure when they're faced with some situations that obviously like might suck, like a restart, or where you're just getting absolutely smoked. You got to be able to regain from that. Seattle only won 1 map this weekend. They got swept by Florida, and then they won the 1 map against the Royal Ravens yesterday. So obviously, you know, this was a team that I believe was 9-4 in map count coming into this weekend, and then they went 1-6 in map count. Obviously not what we expected from them. I mean, I had them as the winner in both of my pick'ems for their series. Obviously, I got absolutely smoked on that front, but I'll talk about that in my pick'ems video for the major. But you know, it's tough to see a team that looks so good only win 1 map. So I think we're seeing that a lot of teams kind of, you know, caught up to the curve of Vanguard. I think Seattle was kind of ahead of the curve. They knew what they were doing. They were really fundamentally sound, had really good teamwork, and now a lot of teams caught up. So it's gonna be interesting to see how they perform at the major and going forward throughout the year. Another thing that I see a lot of people talking about and a lot of people saying on Twitter is like, people are saying that it's bad for the team that since if Pred and Sib aren't slaying, you know, it's kind of like Accuracy and Mac can't pick up the slack. A lot of people are saying like it's worrisome for this team, like you can't trust Accuracy and Mac to pick up the slack, and if Pred and Sib aren't slaying, this team is doomed and all this stuff. And people are kind of like putting the blame almost on Accuracy and Mac, saying like these two can't pick up the slack, so like how is this team going to be successful? But like for me, it's like, how many teams are gonna do good if 2 of their players are -20, right? Sib and Pred, we'll get into their numbers. You know, Sib and Pred went -43 for Sib this weekend and -32 for Pred, right? If half of your team is dropping -20s every series, obviously that team's not going to be successful. So the people who are blaming Accuracy and Mac for like how bad Seattle lost this weekend, honestly, I just think that's super dumb, right? It's not. They both played. Accuracy had 1 good series and Mac had 1 good series, right? Obviously, if 2 players on your team or 3 players on your team are playing bad, how can you blame the ones that are playing good for not being able to carry, right? It doesn't make any sense. So I think obviously Sib and Pred are the more talented slayers on this roster. If they play bad, of course this team is going to do bad. That goes for any roster. If half your team is playing bad, your team is probably screwed, right? There's almost no way you're going to win if half your team is super negative. So the people that are blaming Accuracy and Mac for this kind of thing, definitely not the right call. But this team, I think, will figure it out going into the major, but it'll be interesting to see kind of how they perform based on how they did at the kickoff. I just hope that, you know, they can stay competitive and just don't get smoked and continue to lose their composure throughout the season. season. Next, I want to talk about Toronto. They lost both their series this weekend. Obviously, they played OpTic and LA Thieves, so they weren't easy matches by any means. It's tough, especially when you're going against really good opponents. And then what happened with the whole Shotzzy F8 situation, I think Toronto kind of lost their composure a little bit with that situation, which is unfortunate because this is a team that's super calm at all times. But honestly, it's kind of like one of those things where Shotzzy didn't know he had the F8 on. For people that are saying, oh, how didn't he see the F8 on his gun? I've been playing Call of Duty for over 10 years. I never look at the tip of my gun while I'm playing. I don't know, people who stare at their barrel, like that doesn't make any sense. You're looking for enemies. You're not, I'm looking at corners, I'm looking at windows, I'm running around turns, and I'm looking at all the different spots. I'm not looking at the tip of my gun to see what barrel attachment I have on. So the people that are saying, how didn't Shotzzy notice? That's just a stupid argument in my opinion. But you know, maybe some players do. Maybe some people check what they have on their guns every game while they're waiting in the loading screen. I don't know, but for me, I think that's just kind of dumb. But Shotzzy, obviously, he took it off. Ultra put it on. They still got fried. So I think either way, OpTic's winning this. Maybe Ultra wins that map 1 if Shotzzy doesn't have the F8 on, because how close it was. You could argue the F8 might have played a factor and something like that. But I think either way, OpTic still wins this series just based on how it was looking. OpTic was playing much better than Ultra was throughout all the maps that we saw. So I think the F8, blaming the F8 as the reason OpTic won is not a good call. You know, you could put an asterisk next to the series saying like, what really could have happened if there was no F8, blah, 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 right? I'm not going to go into this after the series saying, all right, OpTic's definitely better than Toronto, right? I still would put Toronto above OpTic after the series, even though OpTic did dominate them. Overall, it just wasn't a good weekend for the Ultra as a whole, right? Bance was the only one who went positive through their 2 matches, and he was only +5. So when Bance, usually, which is the person that's going negative on the team, is the only one going positive, that just shows that it wasn't a great, you know, weekend overall for the entire roster. And I don't think Ultra did anything wrong this weekend. They didn't seem to play like super bad. Obviously, they didn't have great performances, but it wasn't like they were playing awful. I think really what it comes down to is the skill gap in Vanguard is much smaller than it was in like Cold War. You die in like 2 to 3 bullets, so 90% of the time. So it's really just one of those things. Whichever team can get more trades, whichever team is slaying better on that weekend is going to get the match win. So if I'm Ultra, I'm not panicking. If I'm an Ultra fan, I'm not too worried. I think they'll regain, and I definitely think they're going to do well at Major 1. And last but certainly not least, I want to talk about the subliners. They got their first win this weekend, right? They went 1-4 on the weekend, right? So are on the stage, so obviously not great, but I do want to talk about them, and I want to talk about the whole Royalty Neptune situation because I think there's some interesting things to talk about that I think are really important to highlight. So you can see here, I pulled up my Twitter. I actually made this tweet before their series against FaZe, comparing Royalty and Neptune, because at that point they both played 2 series for the subliners, and I think it's important to point this out, right? So in terms of overall KD, Nep edges out Royalty a little bit. Hardpoint KD, Nep obviously was better in his 2 series. SND, Royalty was much better than Neptune. Control, Neptune was better. Non-traded kill percentage, Neptune was better. And then for objective play, Royalty was better in every single game mode when it comes to the objective. So when you look at just the stats, you could argue that Neptune is better than Royalty, at least through 2 series, right? Which is such a tiny sample size. If you come down here, you can see, I continue to elaborate a bit, right? Statistically, Neptune was better than Royalty, but Royalty fits NYSL's system better, right? Neptune said that NYSL just wanted him to sit in hills, play objective, right? Just kind of be like the guy who carries bomb, sits in the point, captures tiers in Control, while the rest of the team slayed out, moved around the map, blah, 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 right? Obviously, Neptune said that's not what got him this far in his career. It's not what he wants to do. But unfortunately for him, this is the system that NYSL wants him to have, whether that's Crim and Crelay, whether that's the coaches, whether that's everybody besides Neptune. That's what they want him to do. So unfortunately, that's the role that needs to be filled on this roster. And that's why Royalty is actually better on NYSL than Neptune is, at least based on the 2 series we saw. So for all the people that are like, oh, Royalty did so bad, Neptune had better stats, Neptune had a better KD. Yes, obviously, but you have to look at the way people fit into the system, fit into their role on a roster, and obviously you can see based on, you know, what I just said, Royalty planted the bomb way more than Neptune. He had more hill time than Neptune, and he had way more tier captures and control than Neptune. He filled his role. He might have a crappy KD, which is something I'm going to get into in a second, but he filled his role on the subliners, which means personally I think he's a better fit for NYSL than Neptune is. But that doesn't mean Royalty is the right fit for the subliners, right? I think the subliners could probably find someone from challengers that can fill that objective role and still put up closer to a 1 KD overall, right? Obviously, Royalty's like 0.75 KD overall is pretty not good for a team that wants to win. If you have a person putting up 0.75, it's kind of hard to win unless the rest of your team's putting up like 1.2s, which isn't what's happening. So personally for me, I think if NYSL can find a sub player that is willing to sit in hills, that is willing to carry bomb and SND, willing to get in those points on control, but can put up closer to a 0.9, a 0.95, or even a 1 KD overall, that's the kind of player that they need, and that would really push them over the hump and maybe make them a team that can contend for a winner's bracket spot. But for now, Royalty definitely fits better than Neptune, but I think NYSL can find someone even better than Royalty to play that role. Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed, like I said, drop a like. We're looking for 3 likes on this video. I'm going to be releasing my bracket for Major 1, my predictions bracket, so I'm definitely excited to see that. And then after Major 1, I'm going to do kind of like a team of the stage sort of deal, like hand out an MVP, who were the top 4 players, sort of like an awards video, so definitely look out for that. And I want to look into some of the statistics that happened that we saw throughout stage 1 and kind of highlight some of the things that really stand out, some of those outliers, and see what players are really performing, what players are really not performing. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, definitely subscribe, go down below, click the link, and go to my Twitter where I like to post stats and talk about CDL. So if you're into that stuff, definitely drop me a follow there. And with that being said, I'll see you all in the next video.